Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
if you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
And you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record button?
I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. To become a member, go to rmef.org.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by Mountain Ops, making outdoor energy and performance nutrition to make you a stronger and healthier elk hunter. They have a full line of hunting-related supplements, including meal replacement shakes, multivitamins, pre-workout fuel, and post-workout recovery. And my favorite, their new performance protein bars that, by the way, are packed with 270 calories and 20 grams of protein, but contain less than 6 grams of sugar. Visit mountainops.com to learn more and to order, and be sure to use the promo code ELKTALK to save on your next order.
The podcast is also brought to you by Gerber. Go to gerbergear.com and learn about the knives, the Vital, the Big Game Vital, the Gator Premium, all the things that we use when we're out in the woods, and not just knives, but also some really cool multi-tools that they have.
And we have a promo code for Gerber as well. Just use the code ELKTALK to save 20% on your orders at gerbergear.com. And we are also brought to you by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls is the original designer and inventor of the pallet plate diaphragm that's completely changed the way elk calls are made and used. And to find out more and to order your elk calls, go to RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com or BuglingBull.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 15% on all of your elk calls and elk call accessories.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by Go Hunt Maps. We've been using Go Hunt Maps since they started, providing them with our feedback and our ideas to add to their maps and their tools. So if you go to gohunt.com and sign up for their Explorer maps, you'll get all 50 states for the low price of $49. And by using promo code ELKTALK, they're going to give you $20 of credit in their gear shop that you can apply towards things you might want for this upcoming hunting season. GoHunt.com, Explorer Maps, promo code ELKTALK.
Lastly, the University of Elk Hunting online course is a proud partner of the Elk Talk Podcast. And within the University of Elk Hunting online course, you're going to find nearly 60 chapters organized in 17 modules of elk hunting instruction aimed at making you a more successful elk hunter. From planning and e-scouting to calling strategies and packing, every imaginable elk hunting topic is included in the online course. And regardless of your previous elk hunting experience or success, I'm confident the University of Elk Hunting online course will make you a more confident, more successful elk hunter. Just visit elk101.com and use the promo code ELKTALK to save 20% when you sign up for a membership to the University of Elk Hunting online course.
And with that, Corey, we are ready to get into it.
Let's jump into it.
Corey Jacobson, how you doing?
Well, I am doing great. I got to sleep in my own bed last night, so.
Really? Man,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to make of that.
Well, I've spent quite a bit of time sleeping on an air pad, and
Really?
yeah, which is fine, but it's just not the same as sleeping in your own bed.
Do you have one of those really squeaky air pads?
It's not too bad. I do have one, and I don't use it because of that. That every time you roll over or move, and I roll a lot, so I can't have a noisy one or I'm awake all night.
Yeah, I was in Nevada I got home a couple days ago. I was there for 10 days, and we swapped out camera guys in between, and the unnamed person shall not be called out, but they had an air mattress that was so noisy, it sounded like, when you bag your groceries in paper bags? That's what it sounded like every time he moved. I mean, even wiggled his foot. It was like, and everybody in the camp would wake up like, oh, what, we got a bear in camp? So he doesn't know it yet, but I'm about ready to go out to the Go Hunt gear shop and buy him a new air mattress. So.
Yeah, I do need a new one. Mine is, it's a super good one. It's one of the Neo Airs from Thermarest, I think, that I bought. Yeah. Gosh, I've had that thing probably 10 years, and it's holds air great, but it's small. I mean, it's small, it's lightweight, and I see Donnie and John with these great big, like 2-inch thick things that are full width that don't taper down, and I think I'm to the age where I can handle packing an extra 2 ounces and enjoy a good night's comfort. So I'm probably going to pick one up.
I can never complain about my wife's shoe collection, because if she looked at my sleeping bag and my air mattress collection, I'd lose the argument. So, but I've got one of those yellow Neo Airs, like you might be referring to, and it's been bomb proof. And when I'm worried about space, because it compacts way smaller than the big other ones, even if the other ones only weigh 5 or 6 ounces more, you got to get the Samsonite Gorilla to jump on them so that they can fit in your pack. So, and then the downside is the colder it gets, the more squeaky those things get.
Yeah.
So, oh well. It's September. It's been 97 degrees here in Bozeman. How are you out elk hunting in this, Corey?
It was about the same temperature where we were. It was hot. We talked about I was going to have to change tactics, and I was going to sit in a tree and shoot an elk over water, and we gave it a good try. I didn't actually climb in a tree, though. We just sat in ground blinds, just built natural ground blinds around the wallows and sat there. And I mean, anytime you're hunting September heat, especially if you get something down, is a concern, and that was definitely a concern and on our minds, but didn't stop us from going and trying.
Really? Well, I had an old friend one time who said, the more you hunt, the better the odds are that you're going to kill something. And that applies. That applies to me, because the season opened in Montana Saturday. We're doing this on Wednesday? So I just got back from Nevada, and rather than go out and hunt in 95 to 97 degrees, I did everything that was on my wife's list that she wanted done before I left town, or that didn't get done when I left town for the prior 2 weeks. So,
look at you.
I'm thinking that I'm a pretty good guy based on that. But I wasn't out elk hunting like you, so the odds of me killing an elk were 0.
Yep. That's a very true statement. And it actually came to be true again on this hunt. But one of the things I always remind myself is, as these hunts go on and you're unsuccessful for 5 days, 6 days, and it's coming down to the end, it can be really discouraging. And, you just want to throw in the towel, especially when it's the same results every day. Nothing's changing. You aren't able to make anything happen. And Babe Ruth used to say, he said something in an interview. They were asking him, it's 9th inning, you've got 2 outs, and you're down a run, and you're up to bat, and you've got 2 strikes against you. Are you starting to feel the pressure? And he said something to the effect of, why would I be feeling the pressure? The pitcher should be the one feeling the pressure. The odds are in my favor when I have 2 strikes against me that I'm going to hit the next one. So, the more misses you have, the more chance the odds are going up that you're going to have a hit here sooner than later. So that was true for us.
I I'm interested in hearing how much are you going to let out of the bag? I saw in your Instagram post that you'd told the world that something happened. So, I mean, are you going to share with the Elk Talk podcast audience, or do they got to go to your Instagram page to find out?
We can share details here. I haven't shared very many details and probably won't until Destination Elk comes out in January when we show the video and the episodes of that. But yeah, we can talk about it. There was some cool stuff. I said that in 35 years of elk hunting, I did something I'd never done before elk hunting, and then followed it up 3 days later with when Donnie shot his bull, something I'd never seen happen either. So it was a pretty amazing trip from that standpoint.
Well, so now you've got the audience wondering, wait a second, when Donnie shot his bull? Yeah. Because in your Instagram post, you said about your bull. So do we have 2 elk stories to tell here, or what's the deal?
we have at least 2 stories to tell.
Well,
yeah.
I'll just turn the mic over to you, Corey. It's your stage to do with what you want here.
Well, I'll spare some of the details just so that there's some excitement in watching the episodes. But we set out a lot of trail cameras on wallows this summer, and the plan was to go back and, I drew the tag in Colorado, and so I'm saving the best week of what I think is the best week of the elk season for that hunt. And just due to my schedule, I try really hard to hunt for a week and then be home for a week and then hunt for a week and be home for a week, just so I'm not gone as much with kiddos in school, and just, I miss them still. So
yeah.
The way it worked out with calendar and everything, I'll be hunting in Colorado the 3rd week, which is, like the 16th through the 24th or something like that. So it just landed that if I wanted to hunt Idaho, we had to do it the 1st week, which it opens August 30th here. And 1st week is always hot. I mean, you're usually dealing with hot temperatures anyway. But sometimes you can get into some pretty good bugling action. And with as many bulls as we had seen in this area in the past, and we put out trail cameras, I thought we'll go with a plan to sit on wallows and hunt that way the first 2 or 3 days. But as soon as those bulls start talking, we're going to be out there looking for the one that's bugling. And we were laying in the tent, in the sleeping bag. I had the Peaks teepee with me, and first time sleeping in a teepee in early season like that. And the verdict's still out on that. I told Bryce, I need a mesh net, because I had more spiders climbing on me in my sleeping bag this season than I was comfortable with. But laying there in the tent in my sleeping bag about 15 minutes before dark, the night before season opened, and a bull bugles.
Whoa.
And I just, it's first bugle of the season, and it's right from camp, and it's going to be good. And another bull answers him, and they bugle back and forth for probably 15 or 20 minutes, and then it goes quiet and it's dark. And so I'm laying literally in my sleeping bag, and I have my bugle tube there, and I thought, I just got to throw one out and see if they'll answer me. And so I bugle. And he answered. And so I got my first answer of the season, and we had a game plan for the next morning. So the next morning we got up, and the bull was just ripping, just bugling, big, mature sounding bull. And so we chased him to the top of the mountain, which, I figured he'd come down to feed and water and probably bedding up at the top. So we chased him 1,200 feet vertical or something, and he dropped off the backside, and the wind was bad. And so that was the story of opening day, as we had to sit out and kind of wait for the wind to change. And by the time it changed, we never did catch back up with that bull. But on the hike back to camp, we had 5 or 6 other bulls bugle as we're dropping down the hill. And each of them just kind of bugled once, and they're pretty timid bugles. But that was fine by me.
Opening day.
Bugle. Yeah.
August 30th, opening day.
Yep. Hot, smoky, all the bad stuff.
I know you weren't hunting in Boise, but while you were talking, I just pulled up the historic weather. The highs in Boise opening day with 98 degrees.
Yeah.
And then the next day, it went to 105 degrees. And then down to 97. And then it was 100. And then 102.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't that hot where you were hunting, but it's still probably within a few degrees of that.
It was
and
hot,
you got elk, you got elk bugling on August 30th when it's in the 90s.
Yeah. Huh. Well, let's fast forward to August 31st.
Okay. Yeah, when it was 102 in Boise.
Yeah, day 2 it went quiet. And we sat water from about 10 a.m. till about 6 p.m. and nothing but a mule deer doe tried to come into the water. You can repeat that for the next day and the next day because it was just no bugles. We couldn't buy a bugle. We didn't even jump elk, and we were glassing 5 or 6 bulls every morning at daylight. We'd glass and be like, okay, that's where we're heading. There's water here. We're going to go sit the water there because that bull has to be coming into water. He wouldn't come into water. They wouldn't move during the day. It was weird. It was almost like it was so hot they didn't want to waste the energy going to water. And they'd get up an hour before it got dark and start moving in, and they'd go out and feed on the sagebrush hillside and then hit the water and go bed down, and that was it. So it was tough hunting, but we did see a group of 4 bulls that fed across an open hillside. One of the bulls had been on the same hillside 2 mornings in a row and had fed through the same little saddle. And so my plan was next morning we're going to get up and hike up there and just sit in that saddle until they came through and try to ambush one, because sitting on water wasn't working. We couldn't get them to bugle. Hiking around all day like we usually do, just it wasn't effective at all. It was just so hot. So we left camp before daylight and put our bows on our backpacks, and we probably climbed 800 or 900 vertical feet from camp and had another couple hundred to go. And it was daylight. We'd glassed up a couple bulls across the canyon on a hillside, and I still had my bow on my backpack, and I thought, man, it's light enough just in case we see something. I should take it off. And so I dropped my backpack there on the open sagebrush hill on a little saddle and a ridge, and I think I undid one buckle on it, and I heard a familiar sound. Well, not an overly familiar sound, but a sound I'd heard before and knew what it was. It was antlers hitting together. And we had watched 2 bulls fight the day before across the canyon. You could hear the antlers hitting from across the canyon. So I was like, all right, bulls fighting somewhere. Where is it? And so I kind of stood up to look around, and I heard, and it almost sounds like a cow, but it wasn't. And I knew it. I'd heard bulls when they rake or fight, they'll make that little mew sometimes. And I heard that and said, okay, I've got to be fairly close if I'm hearing that. And I looked to my right, and 50 yards away, I see a bull getting pushed into the sagebrush, and then he pushes back. I have 2 bulls fighting 50 yards from me from where I dropped my backpack to take my bow off my back. Whoa. So it turns into full scramble mode. Our camera guy, Roy, he's about 50 or 60 yards behind me because he'd been videoing the 2 bulls we saw across the canyon. And Donnie is right behind me, which typically Donnie lags behind a little bit just for, if it's my day to shoot and he's the caller, he'll stay behind, and the camera guy is usually right with me. But Donnie's right with me, and I'm like, there's bulls fighting right here at 50 yards. And we've been hiking up the hill, so my fingers are a little bit swollen just from a hard hike. And I start trying to get my release on, and I don't know, my dexterity is just, it's not cold out at all, but I was fumbling with that release. I don't know if it was bull fever or what was going on, but it seemed like it took me 2 minutes to get that stupid release on. And I finally got it on and stood up and ranged to the back of the bull as they're still just carrying on the sagebrush there. And they're going at it pretty good. It's not just a early season spar. They're getting after it. And I look back, and Donnie's standing there with the video camera and holding it, waiting on me. So Donnie saved the day and got some incredible footage as these bulls fought and pushed each other into a shooting lane, I think 43 yards from me. And it was 150 yards later, we were standing looking at a nice 6-point bull. And that's the other thing is I didn't even know how big the bulls were. It could have been 2 spikes going at it for all I knew. And I didn't look at which one was bigger. The only one I had a shot at was the one on the right. And so I shot him. And as he lifted his head and ran off, I thought, well, it looked like a pretty nice bull. So I lucked into, I said in my Instagram post that a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. And honestly, we were in the right place at the right time. And of course, we had seen the bulls and had a plan to go up there and hunt them. But to catch them fighting, where they're making noise, with the wind being good, in bow range, with me taking my bow off the backpack and be able to get a shot there was no skill involved. It was luck.
Okay. We'll let that statement stand, even though we know it's a bunch of BS. But
no.
See, if you were like me and you were sitting at home, fixing on something or doing honeydews, or I forgot what all I got done this weekend, but it was a pretty long list. I didn't hear any bull elk bugle it from my tent. I didn't see any fighting. I didn't launch an arrow. I didn't even see a grouse. So it was, I'm living vicariously through you until this evening.
Yeah, but like you said, you got to be on the mountain. And that's the thing that I told Donnie there. I'm like, you know what? We could have done the same thing we'd done the last 3 days and just went to the same wallow and sat there and hoped for something different. But we decided to try something different. And although we didn't even make it to our plan, we were heading to that plan when opportunity struck. And so, you have to be on the mountain to have a chance. And it doesn't usually, I was going to say, it doesn't always work out like you plan. It doesn't usually work out like you plan. But when you make a plan, that gets you moving forward, and then opportunity comes.
That was my point for bringing it up that way, is you can't have good luck land on your lap if you're sitting in camp or you're at home doing honeydews. Nothing wrong with recharging your kitchen pass. You got to do that once in a while. But point is, you and I were doing two different things, and you were doing something that put yourself in a position where an elk might end up finding your arrow, or your arrow finding an elk, whichever way you want to say it. And I don't care whether you were doing what I was doing, or you're at the football game, or you're whatever, cutting firewood. The odds are you didn't. You had way better chances of this happening than the person who had given up, who said, you know what, it's too hot. I'm not out. I'm not going to go do this. Or, I'm going to go give it a half-hearted effort. And you got one. You got one. But I don't know how long you were out there, but from what I'm hearing,
that was on day 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you something told me you had to pack some elk out on day 4 and 5.
We did. Day 4 and 5 were spent packing elk out. It wasn't a bad pack for mine. I think about a mile. It was mostly downhill. It had a lot of blowdown, so there was some frustrating parts of the pack. Just we had heavy loads and had to fight some downfall, but that's normal. So packing on a motorcycle is not fun.
You had a motorcycle?
We were motorcycled back in about 8 or 10 miles, and then we hunted from there.
So you had to then haul camp and elk meat out on motorcycles?
Well, just elk meat, because we stayed. Donnie still had a tag, so we brought elk meat out. And I've ridden motorcycles my whole life. Donnie's ridden them a bit, but is not. You put weight on your back on a motorcycle, and you have 2 wheels, but now you have momentum up high with that weight, and every time you go around a corner, it wants to tip you that way. And if you aren't prepared for it, we're, single track mountain trails are pretty, some good steep stuff and a lot of rock and everything. So it's technical. Roy, our camera guy, who drove out from North Carolina, which by the way is like a 33 or a 36-hour drive. He showed up. He'd never ridden a motorcycle before. And so we are at the trailhead.
In the mountains.
He'd never ridden a motorcycle, let alone being in the mountains on a technical trail. But he was game to give it a try. And so I put him on the motorcycle just at the truck there and said, hey, just ride up and down the road and get used to switching gears. So I taught him about the clutch, and it took him 5 minutes or so to go forward and not kill it, get the clutch and the throttle at the same time. And so anyways, he riding back and forth, a little wobbly, and he's like, all right, I think I'm ready. And I said, I don't want to scare you, but this first part is, it's not treacherous. You aren't going to roll to the bottom and die, but you might tip over and get hurt. And, there's just be careful, go slow. You don't have to prove anything here. So he tackled it, and it was slow going. He took it slow, and, he had some tip overs and little things, but nothing bad. So we got him in there. Well, we got my elk, and Donnie said, I don't know how comfortable I am riding that trail with elk on my back again. And Roy said, there's no way I can carry a heavy load of elk meat. So I ended up packing the whole elk in 3 trips on the motorcycle by myself. And they went out hunting that morning, just the two of them. They went and sat on a hillside, and I packed elk meat. And then they came out, and we went into town and got gas and charged batteries and did some just some camp chores there before we headed back in. But got back in Saturday night, and Donnie said, we're sore and tired. We can take the evening off. And so we took Saturday evening off. And then and I didn't realize at the time, he had to be back to work today, which is Wednesday. I thought we had Tuesday to
Donnie
hunt.
did?
Yeah, he got promoted, and he's got people under him and a new guy starting. He had to be there for orientation for this new employee today. Well, I thought we had all day Monday and Tuesday to hunt, and we could drive back Wednesday. So that changed things. So now we're up against a time crunch and not having a lot of luck finding elk that'll cooperate. So we hunted the next day, and no luck. Sat water, no luck. Monday, we had located, Sunday night, right at dark again, we'd located 2 bulls and said, okay, we're going after those 2 tomorrow. There's water here. So we hiked up there. The bulls weren't in the same place, but we went and sat the water. And about 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, I'm sitting there going, okay, I know the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And we're doing that. So I slipped down to where Donnie was set up and said, hey, we have 2 choices. We can sit here on water until 6 o'clock, and then we can go out like we've been doing and glass and try to find a bull. But all we're glassing is across the canyon. We aren't able to find anything close. So the chance of having anything to hunt tonight is pretty low. Or we can bust it back down to camp, pull up camp, relocate camp about 5 or 6 miles away, and hike up into this canyon that we haven't been up into before, that we've always wanted to go into. And he thought about it a minute. He's like, we haven't seen anything on water, so we don't have a good feel about that. And if nothing else, we can go hike up that canyon and at least see what it looks like for next time we come back hunting. So we bombed down to camp. This is 3 o'clock, so we get everything loaded up and stuffed into our backpacks, and we ride the motorcycles over to this new place. And it looked like if there was ever a yard sale you wanted to be at, this would have been it. There was some good gear there, but we took our backpacks and literally turned them upside down, dumped everything out on the ground in a pile, threw the backpacks back on, and headed up this trail. And It was about a 2-mile hike to get up into where, I thought there would be some elk, and we got in there and nothing bugled. So I said, we're just going to keep walking up this basin until we get to the head end of it, which was about 5 miles. And about 6 o'clock or so, we were 2.5 miles up in there and got a bull to bugle. And he wasn't too fired up, but he was bugling. And pretty soon another bull bugled from across the hillside. And the one from across the hillside was fired up and came on a stream coming in. And so we have 2 bulls. Donnie's set up in the middle, 2 of them coming in, and then all of a sudden it goes quiet. And typically when a bull does that, in my experience, they've winded us. And so I tried for 15 minutes there raking and bugling, and nothing was responding. So I moved up to Donnie, and he motioned that the wind had hit him in the back of the head, and the bulls had quit bugling. So we moved up the drainage another, 400 yards or so, and bugled, and the bull answered, another bull. And this bull comes running off the hillside down towards us. We're in a little meadow, and so Donnie goes to set up, and bull gets down, and I start raking, and the bull bugles good, and I thought he's got another 50 or 60 yards to go, and he'll be in Donnie's shooting lane, and then the wind switched. And so in a matter of about 20 minutes, we managed to foul up 3 bulls that were coming in because of inconsistent evening winds, which I know better, especially early. They don't switch until a little later, and you just don't have that good consistent wind you'll get in a couple weeks. But so I said, I learned after that one, okay, we're going to wait until things cool off just a little bit more before we get too aggressive. So let's move up to the next meadow, and we'll just sit there and wait until the wind switch is good. So we got to the next meadow and kind of dallied around a little bit before we dropped in. Then we walked to the meadow and the wind switched, and walked to the edge of it and looked up. There's a 6-point bull feeding out in the middle of the meadow all by himself. And I thought, well, if he's anything like these other bulls, draw your bow now, because he's going to be running to us here, and we've got good wind. So I set Donnie up in front, and Roy followed him, and then I dropped back, and I called, and I called, and I cow called, and I bugled, and I raked. The bull would lift his head every once in a while and look over at us, and then go right back to eating. I'm like, dang it. The one time we wait until we have the wind good and everything, that bull won't respond. So I decided to move around the meadow and get on the other side in hopes that I could entice him across in front of Donnie. So as I'm moving there, I catch the bull moving into the trees behind Donnie, and I thought, oh, he's slipping into the timber and he's going to come around, so this is good. So I set up and do some more calling. Well, as I'm doing it, I look out in the meadow, and there's still a 6-point bull feeding in the meadow. So I glass back, and there's 2 6-point bulls there, one feeding out in the meadow and one moving into the timber that I think might be coming to Donnie. So I moved to the other edge of the meadow, which is, I'm basically on the opposite side of the meadow from where Donnie is, hoping to pull this bull that's now behind him in front of him. And all of a sudden, a third bull bugles from up on the ridge on my side of the meadow. And next thing I know, there's a bull running at me across the meadow, chuckling, and I'm on the wrong side of the meadow, and I'm pinned over there, and I can't move to get back over to Donnie. Well, fortunately, this bull, he's just young enough that he's dumb enough to come into my calls, but he's just old enough to be a little bit wary. So he actually skirts over to Donnie's side of the meadow before he starts coming to me to try to circle around and get to where he can see me. And he gets, I think he was 40 yards or 43 yards from Donnie, and Donnie cow calls and shoots him. And so I go over there, and now Donnie, in all fairness to Donnie, we've tracked some animals with Donnie. He gets excited and doesn't always hit right where he's aiming, but we always get the animal. And typically Donnie's animals go down faster than mine when I shoot them good. And so we have a little joke in our group that sometimes Donnie aims back towards the heart, because when you get up to Donnie and ask him where he hit, he's like, perfect shot right behind the shoulder. I think shot him in the heart. And then maybe he's a foot behind that or so, and the tracking job's sometimes a little longer. So we just joke that Donnie sometimes aims back toward the heart, and Donnie's heart is in a different location on the elk than where we might be. So I walk up to Donnie, was a good shot. Like, yeah, pin was right on it. And he's like, I think it passed right through. And it did sound like a pumpkin shot and passed through. And so we went up there and found his arrow, and it passed completely through. And so I'm thinking, all right, pretty cool. But in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, okay, it's Donnie. Maybe he, shot back a little bit. And well, 2 hours later, we're following a blood trail and realizing that it must not have hit right behind the shoulders. And it's pitch dark at this point, and the bull is going the wrong direction from where we dumped our gear. And I'll save some of the details so that people have something to look forward to. But I've never shot a bull when it was fighting, so that was a first for me. I have never recovered a bull out of a lake at 9,400 feet at 11:30 at night either. And that was the first for me.
So that begs the question, Corey, who got to go swimming for Donnie's bull, you or Donnie?
Well, we might save some of the details for the video, but that bull.
But you got him out of the lake.
We pulled the bull out of the lake. He was when elk get shot, and this is a good thing to learn when you're tracking an elk. I've tracked elk before when they didn't bleed a drop. Sometimes when you hit them back in the guts, the fat and stuff will cover the hole, and you won't get any blood. And I've actually tracked them from slobber before, because when you do hit them in the body cavity, they will get a fever and they're looking for water. They get hot and they want to go find water. And I've tracked bulls for over a mile just on slobber before, just seeing little drops of, literally just saliva. This bull was slobbering like crazy as we got towards the top, like logs soaked in slobber and everything. So I knew he was hit hard and wasn't feeling good. And we sat down at one point just to kind of take a break and be like, okay, we got to regroup here. It's 11:30 at night. We're following a blood trail. And so I looked at my Go Hunt Maps app and I'm like, we're right by a lake. And I thought I heard a splash a few minutes ago, which didn't make sense at the time, but we followed that blood trail to the edge of the lake. And that bull had walked out into the water to find a cool place. And he found it. So, I think Roy captured as much footage as he could in the dark with headlamps and everything. But we worked up that bull once we got him out of the lake and packed. It was 4.96 miles on the track back to our gear, and we got back there at 5:09 a.m. and threw sleeping pad and sleeping bag out on the ground and slept there until the cattle came through and stepped on us about 8:30. So we got 3.5 hours of sleep, and then packed the elk out on the motorcycles. But Donnie still didn't feel comfortable packing elk meat, so I made 2 trips, and he carried my gear on the second trip. So he made 2 trips just carrying camp and gear. I made 2 trips with the meat. But on the second trip out, Roy carried elk meat on the motorcycle and went up this nasty rocky hill. And he was on my back tire the whole way up that hill. He improved so much in just a few motorcycle rides that he was comfortable to pack elk meat on the motorcycle on that trail and kept up with me all the way out of there.
Wow. Well, if you ever ask me to ride a motorcycle on an elk hunt, I'm going to decline. If you ever ask me to retrieve an elk out of a lake in the pitch darkness, I'm going to decline under the premise that, you know what, that cold water is probably going to cool that elk off more than if we drag him up here on the beach. So let's wait for some daylight. He'll be good and cool by morning. Man.
The problem is he's insulated. So he's laying there in the lake with all of that body heat underneath all of that skin and fat. And we were sitting there for a while going, what are we going to do?
Oh, Corey, we're only 10 days into season and you already got these kind of stories to tell. I feel like such a slacker. I've been doing nothing but trying to not get sunburned chasing pronghorn in Nevada. I mean, that's like as luxurious as it gets compared to what you've been doing.
You and I talked last night on the phone briefly, and you mentioned something about my extravagant stories, and honestly, we don't try to embellish the stories, or we lay it out there. I think we just put ourselves. Donnie and I are just dumb enough to put ourselves in positions that the stories turn out really entertaining sometimes. So you won't ride motorcycles with me. You won't retrieve elk out of a lake. Would you go to Alaska with me elk hunting if I invited you?
No. I told you before you even applied for that Alaska tag. I don't need to do that again.
You did not. You're the one that convinced me to apply for it.
I did not. I told you that, what did I ask you? I asked you if your wife would let me take out a life insurance policy on you. That's what I have. That's how much interest I had in going to Alaska. But so now I got a couple questions that I'm gonna I'm gonna try to make them seem like my questions, but they're somewhat questions from the audience. I've got the lunar calendar pulled up here, Corey.
Okay.
Today in Bozeman, the high is supposed to be 97 degrees. Tomorrow, it's supposed to drop to a high of 76, and the next day, a high of 67. But we're coming off the first quarter moon into a full moon. In fact, the full moon is just 3 days away. So I'm going to be hunting the 2 days prior to the full moon. just because the temperature is decent. And it's what days I have before I got to head to Idaho to help my buddy Scott with his Elk Super Tag the following week. How foolish am I to go and hunt 2 days, September 8th and 9th?
They might be the two best days of the season.
They might.
Yep. They might not, but they might be. So you got to be out there.
Here's the other thing, that this is my fallback for why I don't really pay much attention to the lunar calendar, is I've never had a bad day of grouse hunting regardless of the moon phase.
It'd be interesting to see if the grouse are affected by the moon, but I think, and that's just it. Elk are going to be elk. They're going to rut. Yes, the moon can play an effect on their behavior to some degree, but with the heat that we've had, they've been clamped down. I mean, they've been held down by the heat. So I think the cooler weather is going to trigger them in a positive way more than what the moon would trigger them in a negative way for this weekend. So I think the dates are going to be good this weekend. With that said, when I look at all things considered, the moon phase, the fall equinox, all of these different things, I picked when is no moon? Is that like the
no moon is going to be on the 25th.
25th. So that 16th through the 24th is when I'm hunting Colorado, and that's what I figure will be the best week based on what the weather typically can be doing by mid-September, what the moon is going to be doing, where the fall equinox hits, which is on the 22nd, all of those things. But there are a lot of factors on every other day that can make it really good or not as good as well. So I think this weekend, based on what the weather is going to do, now that we're close enough to be able to predict the weather a little bit, it should be good hunting.
Yeah. Well, I'm going because I'm tired of sitting around the house and being here at the office being told what to do. I mean, at the office, I get boss. Come on, I'm not the boss anywhere, Corey. I'm only the boss when they let me, whether it's here at work or whether it's at home. But I want to get out. There's a spot I want to go to because I might go there rifle hunting. And I just want to see how much pressure is there. I want to see these new road closures. They put in some seasonal road closures during hunting season for wildlife protection. And so I want to see, one, are those being obeyed? And two, is that going to help with the elk hunting? I might go there. It might be a complete bust. But you know what? I'm not how do I say this? I'm not just wondering, I'm going to find out. Yeah. A lot of times we look at our maps or we hear about this or we hear about that, and we rely on the feedback of others, which sometimes, that feedback of others is very valuable. Yeah. But I want to go there and just see. If I don't
Donnie's
see anything,
Bowl,
you know what? I've crossed it off my list.
Yeah. No, and like Donnie's Bowl, we went to a new area, not knowing what was there, not knowing what we're going to find, and we found a completely different scenario than where we'd been hunting. Over there on the other side, there were bulls all over. We were glassing, like I said, 5-6 bulls a night, sometimes more, but not hearing any bugles. And then we go into this place where you can't glass. There's just some meadows in the bottom. It's all timber on both sides. And we get back in there, and we have 5 bulls within 100 yards of us. All of them are bugling except for those 2 6 points in the meadow. And we had 2 other bulls that we heard bugle up on the hillside that we never even went after. And so, it's just a completely different game. We were 4 miles away, maybe as a crow flies from where we had been hunting, but things are different. So, there's a lot there. Don't sit at home. Don't miss out on going. You got to be there. Don't be afraid to go and find new areas, and don't get stuck in a rut and just hunt the same area. If it's not going good, go to a new area. Yeah. It might be completely different hunting.
Yeah, I have never hunted this area before. I just e-scouted it, and I'm like, all right, there's a burn. There's some really good bedding cover on some northwest and northwest facing slopes. There's water nearby, and now people have to walk 2 miles to get in there. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be a complete bust. But I'm going to go find out.
Yep.
And starting tomorrow, I'm pretty much elk hunting for the next 2 months.
Wow.
Other than it does get interrupted a little bit by a pronghorn hunt that I'm helping on and a deer hunt I'm helping on. But yeah, I'll be down in your wonderful state of Idaho. I leave on Monday. So
yeah. For the super hunt.
5 days. Yeah.
That's the best elk tag in the state of Idaho.
We'll see if it's a super hunt. Yeah. It's a super tag, whether or not it's a super hunt. You know, Scott, he's counting on me. He's like, hey, I hope you can call one in. I'm like, boy, I don't know. Can you find someone better? But no, that'll be fun. And then I come home for 2 days, de-junk my gear, and then we head into the mountains of Wyoming for on a general tag. So
very cool. I'm jealous. That's one of my favorite tags.
Is it?
Yeah, it's general tag in Wyoming.
I hope it becomes one of my favorite tags too. And then I come home, and then our sweepstakes winner has a limited entry Wyoming tag, and we'll see how that goes. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
No, you got some fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have some elk stories to tell. I don't know if there'll be anything as colorful as what you just laid out here. I mean, you and Donnie, if I didn't get to see video of this stuff all the time out there on Destination Elk, I think I might be a skeptic of whether or not this stuff really happens the way it does. But
well, if it wouldn't have been for Donnie, you wouldn't have been able to see video of it. So he was Donnie on the spot.
That's a dad joke. Donnie being the king of dad jokes.
He told a bunch of them too. People who watch Destination Elk this year are going to be in for a treat. But I can tell you right now, there's only 2 of them that are probably any good. The rest of them was like, what? Is that even a dad joke? Half of the humor is just seeing Donnie tell them, like the way that he tells them. He told one at one point, I'm like, you ruined that so bad it's not even funny that it was funny. Like it was, you couldn't have told that any worse. And so,
and the camera guy's standing there, keeps the camera rolling. Like, Donnie, was that the punchline?
Yeah, when I thought you were going to tell a dad joke. What did you just tell us?
Well, we got an email from Steve from Idaho, who he's got a whole bunch of questions in one email. I thought I'd grab a few of them here.
Yeah.
And he asked if we have a podcast where we've talked about scent control. And I don't know that we have a podcast where we've talked about it. We've talked about it on tons of podcasts. And his comment is like, with an elk's amazing sense of smell after a long hike, I'm sure I'm going to be putting off a bunch of scent. And I don't think they'll be fooled no matter what chemicals I use. Is there a podcast where you guys talk about that? I'd appreciate some feedback. I think he kind of arrived at the same conclusion most elk hunters have arrived at. It's a good way to spend some money on something that probably isn't going to do you any good.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me, he landed at that conclusion. It's interesting how many people don't land at that conclusion and still buy into that. I mean, and I think a lot of it comes from the whitetail woods that, scent control is huge there. And yes, there are benefits to, washing your clothes in carbon and doing some different things there. But when it comes to the elk woods, elk are so dynamic. You're dynamic. You're moving. You're sweating. You aren't able to control your scent. You just really aren't when you're elk hunting. And so all you can really do is try to play the wind. Because if, like he said, if all that chemical stuff is blowing towards the elk, there's enough stink from you coming that's blowing towards the elk, and they're going to be able to distinguish that. So, spot on.
If you smell your clothes after about day 3, I don't care whether you use merinos or whether you use synthetics. By day 3 of hiking the mountains in hot weather, those aren't the kind of clothes you want to be wearing when you're in a vehicle with somebody.
Yeah. And it's not the clothing necessarily that stink. You just can't get the stink off of the skin.
Yeah. So then his other question, is he says he's been practicing his elk calls all summer, driving his wife and kids crazy, looking forward to trying out a new language. But he's worried that the area he's going to is infested with grizzly bears and wolves, and that the elk might not be responsive to calling. So the way I'm going to frame his question is, even if the elk sort of clam up in the presence of predators, does that mean they don't respond or come in or react to the calling of a hunter?
Yeah. No, I mean, elk that are in those predator areas are incredibly wary. They're a different animal than an animal that doesn't have to worry about predators. And so they're wary about everything, every move they make, they're paying attention to the wind because they can't just walk into the middle of a pack of wolves or on a grizzly bear. So all their movements are based on the wind. They just don't take any chances. Their vocalizations, I think they've learned, give up their location. And so they don't vocalize as much. So with that, it is a concern. And I know the general part of the state where he's probably hunting, there's only a couple areas in Idaho where there are grizzlies and wolves, and the elk there are less responsive and a little harder to get in on. But with that being said, they still bugle. They might not bugle as much. They'll still respond to your calls. They might not answer a location bugle from across the canyon. You might have to be closer to get them to respond. They still go through the same motions. Their behavior is just different. So I think, getting close is going to be the key. They might not bugle as frequently or as loudly. So getting close. And, I like using raking. Anytime elk are less responsive to calling, raking seems to, if you can get it close and rake, they seem to respond really well to that. I don't know if it's just because it's a sound that doesn't carry as far. So they're more comfortable doing that. And they've learned to communicate through raking that, hey, that bull's over there displaying his dominance. So I'll rake back and we'll work our way in and do that instead of bugling. But I can still get into pockets of really good. Some of our best elk calling has been in areas where super high grizzly and wolf populations. And for whatever reason, the elk are plentiful and aren't afraid to talk. So it really is area specific and timing specific. And if they're quiet, it's probably due to predators, and you might have to cover a lot more country to get in close and find the elk.
Yeah. Well, here's the last part of his question. I've done a bunch of e-scouting. I found areas at higher elevations with some northeast and northwest facing bedding slopes that have the right aspect and the right slope angle. I think these are some good spots. However, I went up there to the area that I planned to hunt, and I was doing it just to have a look around. I came across some areas lower that were filled with elk beds and scat and a lot of fresh rubs. I can only guess that the elk are there pursuing the best food source at that time, and that's what could have brought them down low. It's especially surprising given that there are cabins nearby. I always thought you find elk as far away from people as possible. I guess this goes to show how little we know about these creatures. So for me, it's, a cow elk is going to be wherever the best possible food is at the lowest risk and the lowest energy to intake that food. So it doesn't surprise me that he would find elk and rubs and beds and fresh scat in a place that he says is premium food. Yeah. It's like, that's where they're going to be. And if they do get disturbed, they're probably going to bump up a little higher in elevation. But if they have everything they need there, they'll put up with a little bit of human presence in the way of cabins or whatever, if it's the best possible food. That's what cow elk are going to do. They got it. They're in that window right now where they quit lactating about a week ago. So they've lost that demand on them. And now they've got 6 to 8 weeks to just get fat. Get fat and get pregnant. That's what their job is for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And the best place to do that is wherever the best food is.
Yep.
It's never a surprise when I find elk in maybe slightly different areas in this archery seasons of pre-rut and peak rut, because the cows, That's just what they got to do. They're if they're going to get fat, they aren't going to do that up in the marginal places of rock and ice, or out in the hot desert, burned up, south-facing slope areas. There's certain bands that provide that, and so if I was him, I wouldn't tell my buddies about that spot. I'd go in there and hunt it.
And it's never about elevation for me. I don't even look at elevation. We've had people say, "Hey, I'm hunting Colorado this year. What elevation should I be looking for elk at?" It's just, there's certain things at certain times of the year at certain elevations, true, but man, there's elk from sea level to 14,000 feet, and they're everywhere in between. So when I'm e-scouting, I don't put a lot of emphasis on what the elevation is that I'm looking at. And he mentioned, I think he said we've mentioned that elk are usually higher up on the mountains. That's a very, very general statement that would have to be put into context.
And I'd put it in the context of rifle seasons. Yeah, they're going to be up higher.
Yeah, and they might bed higher on the mountain, but if you're hunting a mountain range that say is 6,000 to 9,000 feet, there might be a mountain there that's 7,200 feet. So 2/3 of the way up that might be at 6,600, 6,700 feet. We aren't talking the full valley floor to the top of the highest mountain there. There's little mountains and hills and places where they get what they need in bed. So I very rarely will assign an elevation range to where I want to hunt. Like you said, find the feed, find the security, those things, and they might be found at, like he found, elevations that would surprise you.
Yeah. And that's, for me, this time of year, I'm all about trying to be a student of the forage. I want to think like a cow elk this time of year. Yeah. And that's, I was talking to Marcus in our office here, and he laughed at me. He said, "I know why you're going there, because you know that elk and grouse love the same places to forage." I'm like, dang, I got ratted out on that one. He knows what I'm looking for, but I don't care all the other stuff that I focus on for rifle seasons. I have to compartmentalize that and say, okay, that's for the later part of October and November. Now it's about food patterns and finding cow elk. So don't make it any more complicated than that, is what I tell people. And I don't know. I'm pretty simple, Corey. I got to make it simple, or I'm not going to have any luck.
Man, I'm the same way. I confuse myself with simple things. I can't imagine if I made things complicated.
Yeah. So in this hot weather that you guys were out in, you shot 2 bull elk. Mm-hmm. That always brings the concern about meat. And how do you get that meat cooled off? How do you keep it from spoiling? Or maybe I should say that the other way. How do you keep it from spoiling? Which the answer is usually get it cooled off right away. Yeah. How do you get it cooled off right away under these conditions?
Yeah, so that was good. We actually spent a lot of time. Roy, who came from North Carolina to film, has done some deer hunting, but he's like, we've never worried about cooling meat off. So talk to me, why are you doing it? How does this work? And so, we were able to show him firsthand and talk about it and explain it. But realistically, I mean, for me, the hide on the elk is the key to everything. That's what keeps them warm in the winter. It's what, allows them to cool. It's a huge insulator, and they have a very thick insulator. So their body temperature is, I don't know what the temperature is, but when they die, if that hide stays on them, their body temperature is going to stay high for a long time. That meat is going to stay at that higher temperature for a long time. So the key is to get the hide off. And when you get the hide off, the bone holds a lot of heat. And that is probably the primary place where you're going to lose meat in hot weather, is at the bone on the hindquarter. That's just the hottest part. It's got the most muscle around it. It's the most insulated part of the elk's body, is that bone in his hindquarter. So a butcher a while back told me that the thing he likes to do or would recommend doing is if you get a hind quarter hanging there, you don't have to debone it, but at least take a knife and run it down along the bone and open that meat up so that that heat can escape, because it's just being trapped in there around that bone. And he's like, I've seen animals shot in August, September in very hot weather that if you'll just open that up and let that heat release from the bone out, it's going to be just fine. So that's always been our primary concern in hot weather, is get the hide off as quickly as you can. And then I always build a makeshift meat pole. We just put a stick across between two trees to hang at least 2 quarters on at a time. And whether we are leaving the meat on the bone or taking it off, I always have that meat pole and hang the quarters from it. In this situation, we had to pack it a long way and we wanted to get it cooled down. So I just basically, when I debone a quarter, I take each separate muscle off of the bone. Well, I don't take it all the way off in the heat like this. I'll just break it off from the top and kind of peel it like a bloomin' onion, so you've got all these muscles hanging off the very bottom of the bone, but opened up so that bone is exposed all the way. And so each of those individual muscle groups are still attached at the bottom, but they're separated from each other and separated from the bone. And then we'll go back and start working on the other side. Well, it's just that quarter's hanging there with all those muscle groups exposed to the air. And then when we get the other side done, we pull those quarters off. Then we complete the deboning on the first side, while they're hanging there, put them in the game bags and do the second side. And this time we actually didn't put them right in the game bags. We put the game bags on a log, picked those individual pieces of meat off of the quarter and laid them on the log so they can continue to get air circulating around them and cool. And by the time we got done with the second side of the elk, we went over and I showed Roy, like, come feel these with the back of your hand. Feel this fresh quarter we just brought off on the outside. It feels, fairly cool. It's still got some heat, but feel these pieces that have been sitting here airing out, and they were cold. I mean, they felt cold and clammy. All the heat had escaped from there. And then I cut open the hind quarter that we'd just taken off the second side and said, now come feel the bone in here, how hot it is. And, it was very, I've always known it's a stark difference for him. He's like, oh my gosh, it's almost like it doesn't burn you, but it feels like it's hot enough to almost burn, in at that bone. The outside of that same quarter feels like, it's warm, but it's not in danger of spoiling. And then those individual pieces that were sitting out were completely cool to the touch. And those are the ones, once they cool to the touch, we put in the game bag. And once they've cooled down, they're good and there's no concern.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to, somewhere I read what the internal core temperature of an elk is. And I'm mad at myself right now that I can't confirm it. I'm looking through my cheat sheet here. But I believe it was 101 to 102 degrees in the study that I read. So you think about us, we're 98.6, sometimes less.
Yeah.
101 to 102 or 3 degrees. That's pretty high temperature.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest anybody get that hide off as fast as possible, because that is the constraining factor for the heat to transfer. You put up barriers and all of a sudden heat is retained. And that's, there's a reason when you go to the butcher or the meat shop, they have the meat in a cooler. They don't have it under sun lamps. So again, I know people are like, well, that's Newberg. I know that's stupid answer. No, the answer is there for the illustration, as dramatically stated as it could be, that you have to get the heat out of that meat. So, and once you do that, it's amazing how long that meat will last.
Yeah.
And how you can do a lot with it. You can hang it, keep it in the shade, let the wind blow on it. There's all kinds of little things you do. And once it's cooled to its core, down to that bone you were talking about, you can put it in a cooler without much ice, and it's going to stay really, really good.
Yep.
So,
and I would suggest using dry ice. Because you asked at the beginning, how does meat spoil? Heat is the number one concern when you're taking care of it. Number two is moisture. So moisture breeds bacteria, which causes spoilage. So if you were to put a quarter of elk or a boned out quarter in a cooler with regular ice, it's going to keep it cool for a little while, but that ice is going to melt because the meat is warmer than the ice. It melts the ice, and then that meat's going to slowly warm up while it's sitting in water. So bad combination there. So dry ice, put the dry ice on top of the meat with a barrier between it, like a piece of cardboard or something, because dry ice will actually freeze burn the meat if it's directly on it. And putting the ice on top, cold air drops, hot air rises. So by putting it on top, that cold air is able to go down to the bottom of the cooler and affect all the meat. So that's what we do.
And if you don't have access to dry ice, try to bring frozen milk jugs or frozen water bottles or something so that you won't get as much moisture.
Yep.
If you're left with the choice between cube ice and block ice, go with block ice. And here's what I do if I'm stuck in that situation. I prop up one end of my cooler and I put the other end with the valve open so that any melting that could happen from ice will instantly drain out of there.
Yeah.
And that's a short-term fix. You don't want to have that for the long term. And usually I try to put some sort of, I don't care, I've used sticks, I've used trekking poles, I've used whatever to try keep that quarter from sitting on the bottom of my cooler.
Yep.
And just tilt it a little bit, give it a little bit of incline, and just most, like on my Yeti coolers, they have the drain valve, and you look close, there's a hole punched in there, and if you point that to the bottom, it's going to drain out of there. There's going to be almost no accumulation of water in there, because I know a lot of places people are out a long time and their only choice is block ice or cubed ice. I avoid cubed ice like I avoid the plague, man. But
well, like you said, I mean, sometimes it's better to leave it hanging in a tree in the shade and let the air circulate around it than it is to put it in a cooler. Mm-hmm. And and that's always a concern with boning out an elk. You take all these pieces of meat that haven't had a chance to cool. If you just take them right off the bone and throw them in a game bag, that just creates a huge mass of muscle there that's trapping the heat in the middle of that pile. And some of those pieces don't cool very quickly. So that's why it's important to let them air out. And sometimes I'll leave the bone or the meat on the bone, on the quarter, just because it does allow you to hang it from a tree and, make it so that you can get air circulating all around it. Whereas if you bone it out, you don't have that option to get air to the middle pieces as readily. So
well, today we're supposed to have a high of 97 degrees, but tonight this is a pretty high nighttime temperature for us. It's supposed to get down to 56. If I was up in the mountains, that nighttime temperature is going to drop down into the 40s. I would rather keep that elk hanging in a tree at night and let that 40-degree temperature cool it and the wind cool it than to throw it in a cooler that, as weird as this may sound, might be warmer than that outside temperature.
And even with ice in it. I mean, realistically, ice obviously is at 32 degrees or colder. But with that meat in there and the two temperatures coming together, that inside temperature, that cooler might be in the 40s or 50s at best. And so
I'm just a big fan of trying to keep it cool, shaded until I have to hit the road. And when I have to hit the road, get after it as quick as possible. If I'm going to load my coolers, I try to load them early in the morning when my cooler is at a colder temperature and when the meat is at a colder temperature.
So, if I put meat in a cooler, it's always after it's hung and completely cooled. Definitely.
Otherwise, rather than put it in a cooler, I'll just throw it in the back of my truck in good synthetic game bags and just take off. I don't want to have to mess with what's going to happen if this meat doesn't get cooled off quick enough. So.
Yeah. With that being said, with us going to Colorado next week, I always take a big cooler, and if you're transporting it on the road for 12 hours or something, a cooler is a must-have.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So I did just find something here from Alaska. They said that the internal body temperature of a moose is 102.2. So I would guess, elk are probably going to be somewhere very close to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard pronghorn get as high as 103 degrees. And I know I'm not off by too much, but I recall it being elk are between 101 and 103.
Yep.
So I guess we're all somewhere in that ballpark. Just know that you're talking about this huge mass, and it can retain a lot of heat just because of how big of a mass it is. Yeah. And you need airflow to carry that heat away. Airflow that is not inhibited by the leather of a hide. So,
the thick leather of a hide.
Yeah, I mean, if you're out on a hot July day and you're wearing your sandals down at the lake, or you're wearing your leather hiking boot, which one do you think results in your feet cooling off quicker? Going barefoot or wearing a sandal? And I mean, that's really the same thing when you leave the hide on an elk.
Yeah.
I think we made the point.
And the hide on contributes. I have never personally harvested an elk that had a gamey flavor. I've never, all the elk have been good. Even big bulls, old bull, middle of the rut, old timers always say, don't shoot that rut in old bull. It'd be so tough and taste like dirt. And, I think the only time I've ever tasted an elk that had gamey taste was when the hide stayed on it for a long period of time. So if you get that hide off it quickly, it allows it to cool, and the meat is going to taste so much better the sooner you get the hide off.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I'm kind of dealing with is I've got an antelope in my freezer, and that's about all I've got in my freezer right now. I got a little bit of elk meat left and a little bit of moose meat left. If I see a cow elk, I'm going to zip an arrow at it.
Yeah.
I'm here just to tell everybody right now, if I shoot a cow elk, don't be disappointed, because I'm going to do that. I'm just getting that out there right now. I have no problem arrowing a cow elk in the next few days. So,
yep. No, there's no better meat.
Since I'm going to be looking for cow elk in feed patterns to attract bulls, the only thing I'm not allowed to arrow is a spike. Any branch antlered bull or any antlerless elk is fair game. So we'll see.
Yep.
Maybe I won't even see an elk. But this spot has intrigued me for years, Corey. So I just got to go do it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm just glad you're sending me there to check it out for you, because all the places you send me to, we don't ever see anything. So.
Oh, well,
I've always wanted to go up here and check this out. You guys should go check this out for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, nothing living up there other than the mountain goats. Oh, I'm putting in for that mountain goat tag next year, so that's good to know too. All
right. I've been ratted out here. Dang. I'm gonna have to come up with a better trick to convince you to do something like that next time.
Yeah, so, I'm catching on to you, Newberg.
Well, I don't blame you. So. But what else we got to cover? Anything? I'm sorry, folks, that we've been a while. We were supposed to do a podcast that was supposed to drop in mid-August, that was supposed to get recorded at Park City Elk Camp, but they canceled us, and that kind of put everything off kilter. They didn't cancel us. The elk calling contest was still going on, and they said that's more important than listening to Corey and Randy talk on a podcast. So yeah, so we had that, and then I ended up with a pronghorn tag in Nevada off their first come first serve list, so I was gone. And then my son ended up with one, so I was gone for 2 weeks. And I'm like, hey Corey, I'm sorry I can't do a podcast, man, I'm chasing pronghorn. And you're like, oh, that's all right. I'm going to go elk hunting. So here we are. Sorry, folks.
Paths crossed here for about a 4-hour window today, and we're making it happen.
Yeah. So hopefully people understand that we're out there doing it and not just sitting around waiting to do a podcast to talk about it. So,
well, good luck, Randy. I'm excited to hear how your new area turns out.
Yeah, well, it'll just probably be another one of those, cross that off the list. I thought, oh, well.
And that list you're referring to is places to send Corey.
There you go. Yeah, that it'll be over there in kind of that green list of, I'll send Corey there if he asks again. But so no, I'm really looking forward to it. This is kind of the shift of gears for me from pronghorn to elk. And there's nothing more exhilarating than hunting elk when they're bugling. Yeah. It's kind of, I would say the next 5 weeks are pretty much what we all look forward to.
Yep.
It's, if you're a Western hunter, this is it. This is the time. And
the main event.
I'm looking at this drop in temperatures, and I wish that would have happened about a week ago, because when I get that first really cold morning, when I go out and it's like, man, I need to blow out my sprinkler system. I might have frost on my windshield. That's when my mind really is triggered of, what am I doing here? I'm not in elk camp today. This is stupid. How did I not end up in elk camp today?
Yeah.
So, but I'll look forward to your Colorado excursion.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that more just because with it being such a limited hunt, I think, and I cautiously am optimistic that we're going to have a lot of bugling action. You know, and I think a hunt like that, I've got the freezer filled now. I shot an elk here in Idaho, so I don't have to feel the pressure of I need to kill something. I need to shoot something. I can enjoy the experience. I can pass up elk. If I come home with my tag, I didn't spend 18 points to go and fill the freezer with an elk. I spent 18 points to have an experience during September that hopefully will be rivaled by very few other experiences. So I'm looking forward to that.
So, Donnie going with you?
Donnie's going. He's going to pack a video camera and a bugle tube. And then Ben Potter from Kana Outdoors, who filmed The Linguist and put that together. He's going to film for us. So,
well, tell Ben I said hello. I ran into him in Idaho Falls. We ended up at the same hotel a couple of years ago. I'm eating breakfast, and I look, and there's Ben and his wife and his son. I'm like, Ben? He looks at me like, Randy? So, good guy. He was there elk hunting for his own stuff. He wasn't filming that time. So,
we actually, when he filmed The Linguist, he had never elk hunted before. And he got hooked from that experience, and he's elk hunted every year since. And when I was talking to him a couple weeks ago, he's like, I am just so excited because it was like drinking from a water, a hose, a fire hydrant, having never elk hunted, and then going into it with you guys and hunting when we filmed that. And now having, what's it been, 5 years, 6 years, having that experience under his belt as an elk hunter. Now he's excited to come back and hunt with us, having an understanding of what's going on. And so it'll be fun on a lot of levels there to team up with him again.
Cool. Well, I don't know when we'll get to touch base again. Maybe when I get out of the woods and in Wyoming, I can tell you if the general Wyoming elk tag is also my favorite elk tag. Or if it's, maybe I'll just tell everybody, don't waste your time. Corey's BSing you when he tells you that there's elk in Wyoming.
Yeah. Well, it's been my favorite, but what's it take now? 5 points to draw a general tag, and that's before they go and possibly do what they're going to possibly do next year with reducing non-resident tags. And so it might not be my favorite.
Hopefully I got a big story to tell.
Yeah, I can't wait. And you're going with Bo, right?
Yeah, Bo Beatty.
Yep.
And my buddy Mike Spitzer. We're taking llamas in. Bo's already fired up. He's like, how many llamas do you want to take? I'm like, I don't know. We'll be lucky if we shoot one. So, well, we gotta bring this many. And I'm like, Bo, come on, man. We're going to need to bring a shepherd just to take care of llamas for part of the time we're there. But
those llama guys, it's like the more the merrier. If we need 15 of them, they're just empty without even any panniers or anything on that. That's great. Let's bring them all.
Yeah. So I guess that's just if you're a llama rancher, or if you're a horse guy, you don't just bring one horse, you bring all your horses. So. What the heck? We'll see how it goes. But Bo has a deer tag in addition to an elk tag, and he's been calling me. He's like, man, I hope I don't get too distracted by the deer. I don't care whatever gets you excited, shoot it. I don't have a deer tag. So
it's a good problem to have 2 tags and 2 species.
What is that noise?
I think somebody next door just fired up a big machine or something.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe they were landing a jet over the top of your track there or something. Whoa, sorry, folks. Well, with that, why don't we go get our bags packed and go do some hunting? Well, you probably got to go process an elk, but I got to go. I got to get my bags packed. Yeah, you're unpacking, I'm packing. But we'll cross paths again soon, hopefully.
Sounds great. Thanks, Randy.
Yeah, congratulations to you and Donnie. Great stories.